the wrong information you were told when you went down this pathway is, oh, it's easy. Just put a design on a shirt and list it out there, and people will come and buy it. And it is so not that easy. It's doable. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely doable, but it's not so simple as everybody seems to.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are joined by Michelle, who is one of the students inside of WeScale University, who has joined us today to share about her journey starting print on demand, where she's at now, and the lessons that she's learned along the way. So, Michelle, thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to our chat today.
Wonderful. Well, to start off, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, like how long you've been in print on demand, how you got into this, and like what your background was?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting journey. I'm in Kentucky, by the way. You might hint that from the accent here. But I am actually a registered nurse by background. So I've been a registered nurse since I was 19 years old,
Wow.
35 years ago now, if you want to do the math for that one. But I started about halfway into my career in the IT side of things, the information technology, became, a very skilled informatics nurse. I grew up in the computer times. It would just seem like it was exciting to me. And it's been a really good career choice. But I ended up on the vendor side of the world, the corporate world, went through some buyouts and all that fun stuff that happens in the corporate world. And so about last year, or Christmas of 23, I found myself kind of being repositioned out of my corporate world in one of the buyouts and restructuring that kind of comes along with that. And I was just ready to maybe do something different at that point. I'm like, I've done healthcare for a long time now, and I just really would like to do something a little different. I had started in some POD stuff in 23, like the spring of 23, I think around April. Started with just some an Etsy store. I honestly did it to give a couple of my daughters a side hustle and maybe a little extra income. I'm like, hey, let's start the store together and we'll all make a little bit from it. And it really turned into my store because they're in a different stage of life and they just didn't have the time to dedicate to the store. But I enjoyed it. I was having fun. I'm like, hey, I like kind of making these designs and there's people that are actually buying them. And so I had, just a small bit of success in Etsy. But I'd learned kind of the growing curve at that point. And so then when I found myself kind of not in working in the corporate world, I thought, well, if I'm going to give this a try, now's the time to really do it. Here's my opportunity. We also had we were opening our second restaurant in my family, my husband's business. He had one restaurant that he opened in the first year in COVID, which, best time ever to open a restaurant. But it succeeded. And so we were opening our second one. So my time was kind of spent like, okay, let's get the second restaurant up and running and let me see what I can do to make this POD business really grow. That's when I really made the decision to go into Shopify instead of Etsy. I bought into the factors that, Shopify is your store. Etsy is you're never really going to own the store. It's not an asset that you're going to be able to pass on or do something with. So I did decide, Shopify is definitely the way to go. Let me see if I can build this store out. And so I started that journey in about April of last year. And I came across WeScale right about that time, I think maybe a month or two after that. And I really said, okay, I can do this. This works. This still works. It's proven. I believe Chris. He's doing this all the time. I know I can make this work. And so then I kind of went headfirst into the world of POD with Shopify at that point.
Eloquently put. Thank you for sharing. And I'm curious if I'm sure people listening would love to hear, like, even with like the 21-hour course and like, people making their best attempt at like teaching everything, there's still so much to learn. And like, it's very different learning it from, a YouTube video versus experiencing it for yourself in your own store with your own ad dollars and all of that sort of thing. Take us through like those early days, like migrating from Etsy onto Shopify. What were some of like those early challenges like for you?
Yeah, that's a good combination there because, the main big differences in Etsy and Shopify is that Etsy, you can really just concentrate on the designs and the posting and your customer service. But you don't have to worry so much about the ads and the marketing and how to get people to your site. You're just, kind of there. You still do some ads in Etsy, but it's so simplified. It's just turn it on or off, right? And then, Shopify, though, if you're going to own that as your business, then you have to take over all aspects. It's a business now, and you need to look at everything, your finances, your advertisements. How do you get these things sold at this point? Because nobody knows you're there unless
Hmm.
you show them that you're there and you tell them that you're there. So I feel like I had the luxury of having a little bit of the design background and the learning curve for that with my Etsy store. So I came into Shopify at least knowing that piece of it some. So adjusting over to the Shopify side was, building the store really wasn't too bad. That was fairly easy to learn. Lots of YouTube videos to look at for that. But really understanding how you run a business and how you do the advertising for your store. That's where I had to kind of really refocus and rethink, how I was doing this work. All those times when everybody says, and it's probably a question at some point here, it's like, what's one of the biggest things that the wrong information you were told when you went down this pathway is, oh, it's easy. Just put a design on a shirt and list it out there and people will come and buy it. And it is so not that easy. It's doable. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely doable, but it's not so simple as everybody seems to, sometimes they make it look out there.
Yeah, and something that I've really enjoyed about getting to observe your journey is that you seem to have like a very, on the outside looking in at least, like a very positive attitude about things. And I'm sure that there's obviously days where things feel really challenging and tough and naturally, but I feel like one of the biggest areas that I've noticed that in you is in an area that a lot of people struggle, and that's in the designs that we work so hard on, we put our heart and soul into, and like every design that we put together, we have at least some belief that it might sell, but a lot of the time, majority of the time, that turns out not be the case. How did you
Mm-hmm.
like deal with that, the harsh realities or like feedback that we get from the market, especially as you're like learning all these new areas all at the same time?
Yeah, so I probably got a little bit of that from Etsy because, again, a lot of the suggestions, recommendations is it just put a lot of stuff out there. Throw a lot at the wall and something's going to stick sooner or later. You'll make a few sales. But there was a ton of designs I put on Etsy that never sold one time ever. And so I guess I probably was a little bit used to that reality already. And I think the learning curve that did help me the most, though, is when you do step back and you really do look at your designs, though. It's like you're not just throwing a lot of things out on the wall. You have to do your research. You have to see what's selling. You have to see what your market is buying and what is resonating with them. And so anytime that I took the time to really do my research and do my understanding and create good designs based on that information, those designs often sold. Like most of those would sell at least one or two times versus stick in my store and never sell again. So I think the learning curve there it is about quantity. You do need a lot because you need a lot of choices for people to choose from, but there has to be a good quality to it. And the quality is more about, what is it that your customer wants? What are they looking for? And one of my best designs I actually had, it is my best seller. I actually had a customer just send me an email and we were chatting and she's like, oh, I've always wanted this design for blah, 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 blah. And she kind of described it. I'm like, well, I could probably do that. And I created it and I put it out on my store. Ironically, she never bought it, as far as I know. I don't think she. I even wrote her back. I said, "Listen, this became my best seller. I'm going to send you a shirt and stuff." And I didn't hear back from her and stuff. So that I thought that was kind of interesting in there. But it became my best seller. So it's you really have to listen to your customer and you really have to hone in on what they are interested in. And I think that's one of the main keys to the success of the business.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm curious, could you take us through, you mentioned in there that there were some designs that you had one process for where it was more research based and like kind of did your due diligence, it sounds like, opposed to the other
Mm-hmm.
ones. Can you take us through like at a high level the difference in like those approaches?
Yeah, so I kind of did in the beginning of my Shopify, I put what I would call some filler designs in there just
Yeah, my
because I
favorite.
needed to kind of just, look good, get the volume up and stuff. And, sometimes I bought packages of some basic designs or downloaded some basic graphics and just added a little bit of information to it. But I really didn't design them. I'm like, oh, that looks cute. Let's just put that out there kind of thing. And I have since actually kind of taken a lot of those down now that I've understood my customer more because I'm like, okay, they are not looking for that design. That is not resonating with them. So I've taken a few of them down just to give my store more cohesiveness out there. So the way I would always study my designs and do my research is, definitely what's selling in my store, what are the ads, getting everybody's attention out in the Facebook land, what are they responding to? And then I still like to go to Etsy and look for the best sellers and use some of the ranking tools to see, what's resonating out there. Amazon, go on there and look and see what has a lot of reviews, things like that. And so it's just really just seeing, what's in the market, what's out there and available and resonating. It's the simple ones still. It's not crazy big graphic, at least in my niche. It's not crazy big graphic designs. It's the simple things that still, really sell the most out there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, less is more, definitely in terms of both the designs and in terms of the mock-ups a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so when you launched Ballpark, do you remember like how many designs you had live on the store? Then I'm curious, like how many designs we're at today.
So that's a little bit interesting because before I started down the WeScale path, I had actually opened my store already, and my focus was not going to be on shirts. That was going to be just my side piece, right? It was going to be, I'll put some shirts on there because everybody wants some shirts. But I actually focused more on home decor and some decorative stuff and some more personalized things like that. So when I started, really looking at your way of thinking and some suggestions and recommendations there, I decided to focus more on the shirts at that time and really make sure that I could prove that out and then go back to see how my decor part started. So my store is already open. And so I had to kind of fill in the designs rather quickly. I probably had 50 to 60 home decor type of designs that were very specific, very personalized. And they're still in my store too. And I do still sell them. I just don't put them out front and center as much. And so on the t-shirt side, I might have only started with 40 or 50 designs at that point. I probably got up to 250 and then started bringing a few back down. I'm probably back up to about the 250 mark now, though, at this point. I just did a little cleanup and some changes in my store, so I don't know the exact count anymore, but I'm probably still around there. And actually, that's going to be my next big focus now that I've made some shifts that I was working on. I'm like, okay, I've got to really get some more designs out there at this point. Mm-hmm.
There we go. So we launched with about 50 or 60 t-shirt designs and then very quickly 5x the size of the catalog and then maybe even 6x since we backed some of those out. So like that, the amount of like iterations in there is awesome. And
Yeah.
was there a lot of times that can be like a mental block for some people in their minds, like thinking like once I hit a magical 100 number, like things should just start falling into place. What was your mindset about that?
I noticed myself if I did get lazy, I wouldn't say I got lazy on design. I started focusing on other things. I was trying to concentrate on the learning curve for the ads or optimizing my store and things like that. So I wasn't like putting more designs out there. And I got to the point I felt like I've done all I can do here. And why aren't things kind of progressing? And then I noticed when I did step back and say, I've been putting good designs out there lately and stuff. And I started, refocusing on that. Everything would always go up a little bit, and my sales would do a little better. And those designs were resonating very well with my market at that time. So yes, it's evident that you have to keep your designs in mind. That should be kind of front and center of your business because you're not going to make sales with very few designs, and you're not going to make sales with designs that don't resonate in your niche too. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's kind of like if we use the car metaphor, the designs is the fuel. And so we always need fuel in the car, but especially in the beginning, it can be easy for us to get sidetracked, like working on the engine and making sure the wiper fluid is filled up. And then like, oh yeah, and we need to put fuel in the car. And that ultimately makes it go. So it's only like a recurring theme that we come back to. So you had some sales on Etsy, then 50 to 60 designs on Shopify and launched. Then take us forward to what was that very first sale like on Shopify, like with your apparel? Like, what was that feeling like for you?
I made probably a couple sales with the decor part before I started selling some of the t-shirts. So yeah, from the very beginning, it's always a good feeling when you sell something because I have now, in Shopify, I've advertised it. I've looked for people. People have actually seen what I had to offer somewhere out there in Facebook land. And they came to my store and they've trusted me enough to purchase one of my products. I just, it's a good feeling. That's just kind of cool when you think about it. And then that goes on and on and on until you're like, oh, I've sold quite a few shirts today. There's a lot of people. And then sometimes I look at just the amount of money people have given me to buy my shirts. And it's still kind of a surreal feeling there and stuff. So it's like, it's really cool. And I just started the international side. And so I have made just a few sales now on the international side, but I got to thinking it's like, somebody in like some remote area of whatever country could actually be wearing my shirt right now. so,
Yeah.
so it's like, and I designed that, and they liked it enough that they trusted me to spend some money in my store and get that shirt. So that's a little added layer of, that's pretty cool out there. I think the customer service part is honestly one of my favorite parts about it. I've
Nice.
had, it's got its challenges. Don't get me wrong. It can
Right.
be a little interesting, but I've kind of made it a goal. If I get a customer that's maybe not real happy about something, I make them my best friend by the time I'm done talking to them. And their tune changes very quickly. And it really is about killing them with kindness there. It's just really just, pouring it out with them and saying, hey, I completely understand. I know where you're coming from, blah, blah, blah. Over the holidays, I had a lot of grandmothers buying gifts for their granddaughters. And unfortunately, I think they didn't realize how much their grandchildren had grown. So we had a lot of size exchanges during that time. But you know what? I helped them. I went over things with them. I got them the sizes and stuff that they needed. They were all very grateful the whole time. They would text me or email me on a regular basis and stuff. And so you kind of got to know these people. And I know that that's going to be a customer for life now. They're going to be coming back. And when they email me back or they leave reviews and stuff like that about how much their grandchildren love the design or they love the shirt and stuff, and that just feels really good. I like to get that kind of that feedback back, and I do have a pretty good rating. So and some of that is people will honestly say, hey, I had problems with this seller. She was great, and I really appreciated her. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that really summarizes like the difference between building like a brand versus just selling stuff online. Like the brand is really, it's part of it is the products, but it's so much more about like the reputation that we're building with our customers. And I think it's a common theme that I've seen amongst people that have been most successful with this, or the ones who get that. They get that it's real people on the other side. Yes, it feels like a lot of numbers, just Wi-Fi money at certain points, but at the end of the day, it's always like a real person on the other end of things. Perfect segue into the next question, which is like picturing, 12 months down the road, like what would you be excited about like building the brand into? Like what's the future look like?
So definitely more profitable is it's one of the biggest goals and stuff there. But, being able to grow it and build it and make it profitable in a way that I can start kind of hiring some VAs or folks or other ways of managing some parts of the business. I like to be able to, there's parts of you like to focus on more than others. There's some things that are more fun than other parts. And I want to have a little bit more freedom to kind of step away from the business when I want to. And so I want to make sure that I kind of set everything up in a way that, allows me to do that. And then if possible, I'm going to circle, full circle around. Maybe it is something my girls can get involved in and still have their little side income or maybe full-time income once I show that, this can be a successful type of career. So it still may come full circle and bring it back around to them at some point too.
Yeah, and reflecting back on like from when you started to where we are now, and then like looking into the future, what's like one of the biggest things that surprised you, or like maybe a misconception that we had coming into the process that now like looking back on it, it's like plain as day, like hindsight's 2020. Were there any things like that stood out to you?
Getting to the point of being profitable, it's all a numbers game, right? It's high volume. And which is different than if I had a retail store or something like that. It's our higher profit margins on my products. It's really a high volume. And so when you think about how much you're selling, you might tell somebody, oh, I sold $50,000 worth of something, and they look at you like, wow. I'm like, don't worry, it's not all profit and stuff in there. So really understanding that piece of it and making sure that you're hitting the right ranges and stuff. The reality of that has been interesting. Now I can equate that to my husband's restaurant as well. It's luckily it has been fairly profitable from the very beginning. And it does bring in a lot of money every year, but it costs a lot to run that business as well. There's the amount of payroll that you put out on a regular basis. That's going to take up a lot of it. So his profit margins are really not that different than my profit margins.
Right.
So I had to kind of adjust myself and think, well, yeah, that makes total sense though when you really stop and think about it. So
yeah, and yeah, the path to profitability, it's like also paying down like the learning curve in the beginning, right? Yeah. Like not knowing what you don't know, and like the times that we sometimes work on other parts of the car rather than like just filling up the fuel. So like those, are there any areas like those, for example, that for anybody who's listening, who's getting started and like, obviously everybody's goal is to get to profitability as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
What would you say to those people? Like, where should they be placing their focus? How should they be thinking about things?
Yeah, so I think the biggest two things with profitability is really understanding your cost of goods sold. So you want to make sure that you're charging enough to the customer, or you're finding cheap enough product out there so that your cost of goods sold is staying at the 40% or so range. Because if you don't watch that closely, you won't realize that it's not as good as you think. So there were, times last year that I would start looking at my end of the year figures and numbers, and I'm like, or my end of the month stuff, and I'm like, wow, that didn't come out the way I expected it to. And so you really have to stay abreast of that. You really have to look at where your money's coming and going. And so making sure you understand that piece, I think I needed to understand a little sooner in my journey. And then understanding the ad spend and make sure that, there is a learning curve, and it's an investment. And so you do have to kind of build up and, create that part of the success. But making sure you really kind of understand how to watch that on a daily basis or regular basis in the very beginning. And so to make sure that you're not spending too much on your ads. That's a lesson I think I could have done a little better in about a 2 or 3 month period there that I would have benefited from.
Yeah. And then the rapid fire questions that kind of build on that. You've already touched on one of them, but I'm curious if there's anything else that you'd add on. What's the worst advice you've ever heard about print on demand?
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, it's so easy. Just do it. It's easy. Yeah.
So easy a caveman could do it, right?
Yeah, anybody can do it. And I wouldn't say that I would say Etsy was my worst advice out there. It was a good entry, a good learning curve for me. And it's fine in the right situation and stuff. But for me to make this a profitable full-time business that eventually I would like to have an exit strategy for, I knew I had to just shift for that. So I wouldn't call it a bad advice. It was not the long-term advice for me, though.
Yeah. So like for the right situation and goals, it's different for everybody,
It's
right?
different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Second rapid fire question. What would you say is the most valuable skill for print on demand success for somebody who's just starting out?
I mean, it's got to start with your design. You've really got to understand designs and how to create designs. And even though there's a lot of AI out there and they can help with you a lot and stuff, it's still a very core of, really understanding what looks good and stuff. And my learning curve has been, huge in that regard. I look back on some of my initial things, or even, learning how to place them on the shirts and stuff. I would make them too big sometimes, and we would get samples at home so you could start seeing them. And actually my husband has way too many samples at this point and stuff. But really, where do they sit on the shirt and stuff? I mean, all of that is a learning curve in it. And I don't think you always realize that when you start the journey and stuff too. So I think design is definitely core. And then the next one would be understanding the ads and how to react to the ads and how to manage your spend and stuff. I think that's the second big one.
And then the final question, the most fun one for anybody who's watching, who's going through the classic entrepreneur cycle of like uninformed optimism, informed pessimism, then the valley. And the valley is where we're going through all the testing, making designs, throwing stuff up against the wall, hoping something will stick. But a lot of times we're met with finding out the designs or mock-ups weren't that good. What would you say to anybody who's going through that stage, like as they're in that valley, so to speak? Like any words on like how to keep going through that?
Yeah, I think the biggest is to give yourself some grace and really understand what all you have learned and how far you have come. If you look back at your early successes or I wouldn't even call them failures, your early learning opportunities, you really accumulate a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills going through this journey. I mean, I could set a Shopify store up in probably half a day now. I wouldn't even begin to think that was possible a year ago. I could probably have one up and running with enough designs within just a few weeks now. I couldn't have done that before. And again, how far my designs have come from the very beginning to what I can do now. It's a big progression. I would never call myself an artist, I think.
Me neither.
I never called myself really artistic and graphic and stuff like that. But I have always said I'm good at copying others. So,
great artist steal.
Yes, I don't steal exact same copies and things like that. I gather inspiration from others. And so I'm good at recreating. So you don't have to be completely artsy to be able to do this and stuff. You just have to learn what resonates. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just have like an eye for good design, and then introduce like a healthy mix of like your own personality and like knowing your niche. And that's what I took a lot from this conversation, is that one, you clearly really care about your customers and like getting to know them like on a personal level on the other side, which one just speaks to the kind of person you are. But then two, like as the brand owner that you are, you're like obviously you are in your niche to begin with, but then two, you're getting to know everybody on such a personal level that then permutates through everything you're doing. And like most clear example is getting a design idea straight from them and it
Yeah.
becomes a bestseller. So
Yeah.
it's that. And then another thing that I took from our conversation is your approach to a lot of the problems and challenges you have is that very refreshing, that you truly have like a win or learn mentality. It seems like with those challenges you have like and maybe from your previous business background has lent itself a lot of this, that it's like every challenge is truly like not even just trying to whitewash it. It truly is like just an opportunity to learn. It's just a matter of how if we want to look at it as something that's tearing us down or something that's building us up, making us stronger for the future.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for taking the time today. And for everybody watching, thank you for joining us. And please be sure to comment down below if you have any words or anything that Michelle said resonated with you in particular. We'd love to hear from you guys. But other than that, thank you again, Michelle. This has been awesome.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. And, good luck to everybody on their journey out there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you soon.